All right, we're back once again from the break. And again, to remind you, we have Bob Barnett on the line. Bob, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks.
Fantastic. Bob is going to speak to us real briefly about a few of the things he's dealt with extended stay and what he does with hospitality in general. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Scott. Scott, you know Bob a little bit better than I do. Why don't you go ahead and take over?
Thanks, James. Yeah, Bob just did a lot of training with our company, and just phenomenal training. He's got a great past, a lot of strong upper-level management with Marriott hotels. And Bob, could you just give us a little quick bio on what you've done and what you're doing lately?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm in my 29th year in the hospitality business, so I've been at it a while. I started right after business school and spent some time at a company called Guest Quarters doing sales for a couple of years and some time in operations and even a stint as a hotel controller. Went over to Residence Inn back in the pre-Marriott days in the late 80s and was part of Residence Inn for quite a few years, was a general manager with them and regional manager, spent some time at corporate headquarters running the sales and reservations disciplines, and eventually became the brand vice president for Residence Inn. Also spent some time with Marriott over in the full service world, got a chance to be a general manager and cluster general manager for full service Marriott. Left Marriott around 2000. I've been mostly on my own doing consulting since then, although I did take a position with one of my clients for a couple of years on Bridge Street in the corporate housing industry, where I was the senior VP for the U.S. for Bridge Street for a couple of years. But for the most part, I'm focusing on consulting at this point and do a variety of different things around leadership and sales, customer service, and strategy, and primarily in the hospitality business. And I'm grateful to have the chance to be with you guys today.
Cool. Yeah, I know you've got so much experience in hospitality, and I got to say your sessions when you do training, the time passes so fast. You do such an entertaining job, and yet everybody's engaged, everybody participates, and that's what through your company, Concentric Consulting. I noticed in your statements that you've made that you focus on helping organizations define their mission, their vision, their strategy. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, and very often what I find when I first start to work with a company is that that's not necessarily their first focus. They often will come in looking for help with sales or help with customer service or that kind of thing. But one of the things that I really believe strongly is that it's important for the company to have a clear sense of what its mission is and what it's really trying to accomplish. And if you don't sort of have that groundwork in place, it's difficult to lay in the specific sales strategies or customer service strategies and have them work, because you find that people in the organization are working at cross purposes. So I often will try to get the client to kind of stop and take a step back and see if we can't get pretty clear about what the mission and the vision and the strategy for the organization is, and then think a little bit about how clear is everyone in the organization? Do we have a real strong sense of alignment throughout the company so that everybody is on the same page? And that, if we can get that kind of groundwork in place, that's going to make whatever the specific programs are a lot more effective when we get time to roll them out.
So what you're talking about then is even more specific than the brand or the voice of the company. You want to make sure that the message is consistent as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think there's sort of two different philosophies that you can take towards running an organization, and one of them is sort of an SOP-driven kind of philosophy where you really sort of treat the employees as interchangeable parts, and you really try to define everything from the top of the organization down to what the frontline employees are doing through standard operating procedures, and have it all really buttoned up that way. And that strategy certainly can work, and there's a lot of companies that have been very successful about using that strategy. But my preference is for a strategy that's more of a shared vision and an alignment kind of strategy, where you get everyone to understand what the organization is trying to accomplish, what it stands for, what its core values are, what the strategic direction of the company is. And if you do a good job of that and really communicate it well throughout the organization, what you find is that you don't need as much in the way of standard operating procedures because the employees become empowered to make decisions because they understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. So it's less about everyone having to do things exactly the same way and more about engaging people's hearts and minds in the service of the overall mission of the business. And I find that you get people a lot more committed and passionate, and you get more of their creativity and energy into the company when you can create that kind of environment. It's a little bit more difficult and takes a little more work on the front end, but I believe that you get a lot more out of it if you make that investment on the front end.
Yeah, that is certainly the kind of company that I want to be a part of too, and I can understand the excitement that comes along with that. But there are challenges. That might tie into kind of the next question I had for you. Is there anything about our industry in hospitality or with companies you've worked with, anything that has really frustrated you or you see as a big hurdle?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing that I would point to is it is an alignment issue, and in this case, it's an alignment issue between ownership and management. And in a lot of situations in our industry, you find that the owners and the managers are two different organizations, and certainly this is not always the case. Some owners come to the table with exactly the same interests as the managers have, but in many cases, the ownership is really more interested in getting value from the organization through a real estate kind of play, where they're looking to acquire a portfolio of properties, try to increase the value, and then turn around and sell it and make a good profit that way. Can certainly understand that motivation, but it tends to work against some of the goals of building a long-term successful business and investing in the people, investing in long-term client relationships, and building something that's going to really sustain itself over the long haul. So that's probably the biggest thing I would point to, is that when you get that misalignment between a short-term mentality from ownership and some of the goals of building a longer-term successful organization, that can cause a lot of problems.
That's very well said. That I think a lot of us have kind of felt that too, but that's a good one.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it takes a toll on the employees in the organization, on the managers, and on the customers. There's some incentives that work in favor of building that short-term value that work against building those long-term relationships, and there's an incentive to not reinvest in the product, for example. So the less you invest in the product in the short run, the more money you bring to the bottom line, and therefore you may be able to flip the company for that much more money, but that just leaves someone else holding the bag down the line. So
right,
sure.
Right.
Well, we've seen that happen time and again. It was interesting. I just saw an article in USA Today. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but they were talking about how the long-term implications of companies focusing on TripAdvisor comments in the short term. And the long term is that you've dialed down so much just responding, and this is kind of a separate but equal scenario. But you've got so many of your line level staff focusing on these comments now that they're forgetting the broader picture of the service. So it's become now that the focus on comments or social media almost is detrimental to the overall service of a company. Are you seeing that as well? I mean, is that another obstacle you're dealing with?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I hadn't actually seen that specific phenomenon you're talking about. It makes some sense to me. I think tying that back to some of the work I've done on customer service, I hadn't necessarily seen so much the focus on TripAdvisor, but in a lot of cases, the focus when you're dealing with any kind of customer feedback, whether it's TripAdvisor, social media, or an internal guest comment system that you've got set up, the focus in a lot of cases is really just on that individual incident and trying to fix it with that specific guest. And that's great. I mean, we need to do that. We need to make sure that that guest comes away from the situation feeling good. But I think what happens a lot of times is that organizations miss the bigger picture, which is, what are the trends we're seeing? What are the frequent recurring problems that guests are experiencing that are taking away from their experience, and how do we fix those for the long haul so that we're not just continually kind of putting Band-Aids on situations, but we're looking for ways to prevent those problems for future guests coming down the road.
That's such a good point, because if your comments are coming to you saying your staff is rude, well, we got a big red flag. If the comments are coming back that I wish your beds were more comfortable, that's something we can work on too. But we have to look at those things and really focus on how to make it right and improve. It can't be just about begging people to give us good scores. It's got to be about really making a change and making a difference in the company.
Yeah,
it's
that's
got to
exactly
be a paradigm
right.
shift. Yeah.
It's
almost become. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, there's nothing more frustrating to me than to have an employee at the front desk or some other place in the hotel, make a blatant appeal to the customer to fill out a good survey when they're surveyed. The focus at that point is on the survey and getting a good score rather than being on providing excellent service. And I find that, unfortunately, that kind of mentality exists in a lot of places in the hotel business. Like, let's focus on getting a good score, but never mind whether we're actually delivering a great experience to the customer.
Right, and using it as the powerful tool that it can be.
Right, exactly. Instead, you're using the metrics as an excuse. You're to cover your own butt. It's almost that we become such good firefighters we've forgotten about fire prevention.
There you go. That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy.
That's great. Well, on my next, the other question I had was, what about success stories or anything that you're particularly proud of that you can recall or share with us?
Yeah, I probably have a few things I could speak to. I guess the one that jumps out for me is when I went from the corporate headquarters in Residence Inn over into the full service world of Marriott. That was an interesting transition, and frankly, there were a number of folks that weren't necessarily rooting for me to succeed making that transition. There's kind of a competition internally, and the full service Marriott folks were the kind of the old guard, and here was this upstart coming across to run a full service hotel. And so there was some skepticism, and it turns out that the hotel I ended up taking over as general manager was a hotel in desperate need of a turnaround. It had been through a really rough series of managers that had not done a particularly good job. It was last in the region in a number of metrics, and the owners were really upset with Marriott. Were basically on the verge of suing the company over mismanagement and that kind of thing. And so in the course of a couple of years of taking over that hotel, I was able to really turn it around and build a team, get people to believe in themselves and the product, and turn it from the last in the region in most of these metrics to one of the best in the region. So that was very satisfying. It was nice to see the results of those efforts over the course of the first couple of years there.
That really is neat. It's always nice to look back and see the things that we are proud of that we've accomplished and have those success stories.
The irony of this podcast, is that although it is a hotel-centric podcast, we've actually had some listeners lately that aren't in the hotel industry, and it occurred to me while you were speaking, they might be surprised that a general man, I'm sure Scott can relate to your big success story as well. We're always most proud when the underdog succeeds, when the guests respond and they start enjoying the hotel as well. And I think that there are some people that are travelers that don't realize how overall invested and passionate hoteliers are about their hotels.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it goes to what really was the reason I got into the hotel business in the first place, which is that the people are the product. There's obviously a physical component to the product, but at the end of the day, it really is about how well can you inspire your team to deliver the kind of service and consistency that you're looking for to give the guest a great experience. And that to me is what's really exciting, is getting people bought into the idea that we're here to take care of these guests and make a difference in their lives. And it can be very rewarding when you see see that come together and everyone starts to move in the same direction.
Yeah, those are some of my proudest memories are those incidences where people have come along or we've done something special for a guest.
Mm-hmm.
I was also going to ask, you mentioned you had 29 years in hospitality, and that's a long time. Have you had anything recent that you've discovered, any epiphanies, anything new that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Well, it's an ongoing struggle to keep up with some of the technological changes, and we talked a little about TripAdvisor, and certainly all the things that have happened with social media and all the different third-party booking channels and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of change and a lot of things that you need to keep up with. But I guess what I would come back to is that as much as things change, the basics of success in this industry really do remain the same. It's about a clean room, it's about a comfortable bed, a television that works, a hot shower, breakfast cooked and good and on time. I mean, people want the basics, and in most cases where hotel companies fall down, it's not because they're missing the latest and greatest innovation. It's because they're not executing the basics well. And people tend to want to focus on what's new and what's different. But, unfortunately, in our industry, what's new and different is executing the basics consistently really well. Not very many organizations can do that. And if you can do that on a consistent basis, you can really stand out from the rest of the industry.
It goes back to those fundamentals, kind of similar to something Anthony just told us in a recent interview too.
Yeah,
I just heard him say it the other night. Piss poor performance leads to piss poor preparation leads to piss poor performance. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
That's neat. Well, with your company, Concentric Consulting Group, if I'm a hotel owner or company and I'm interested in knowing more about your services and how to contact you, could go ahead and give them a little information on what they can do to find you.
Sure, absolutely. The quickest thing probably is just to give me a call. My telephone number is 540-592-3742. And my email address is a long one, and it's bob.barnett, B-A-R-N-E-T-T, at Concentric Consulting Group. I'm sorry, that's wrong, concentricconsulting.com. So it's CONCENTRICconsulting, concentricconsulting.com. Just rolls right off the tongue.
Absolutely.
I'd be happy to hear from anybody who might need some assistance.
Fantastic. And remember, guys, we've said it 1,000 times, Scott, but training is key. If you've got money earmarked to improve your property, and you've already got the beds, you've already got the upgraded breakfast, and you're looking around, scratching your head, saying, what's the next thing? Well, the next thing is the first thing, training. Spend the money on training. Get a professional trainer in there and improve your staff's tools to make the hotel succeed. It's invaluable. I'm sure you'll agree, right, Bob?
Absolutely. Scott and I were just part of a conference where Jim Donald, the CEO of Extended Stay Hotels, talked about if you want to make the numbers dance, make the people dance, and they'll make the numbers dance. And it's exactly right. You got to invest in the people, and that's how you're going to deliver the right experience for the customer.
Fantastic.
Bob, thanks so much for taking this time to talk to us today. Look forward to following your career in the future and staying in touch with you on that.
Terrific. Scott and James, I've really enjoyed it.
You bet. Thank you very much, Bob. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.